Ali, thanks so much for coming on the Unstacked Startups podcast. How's everything today?
Things are good. Things are busy, but busy means good. Thanks for having me.
In the startup world, busy means good. That's for sure. Ali, what are you working on? I understand the startup, the company is called Amigo. Fill the world in. What is Amigo? What's your vision for it?
Yeah. So imagine having a world-class executive coach, having a world-class therapist, having a world-class consultant, dietitian in your pocket 24/7 at a fraction of a cost. That's the world that we're trying to create, but we're taking a pretty different approach to it. We're not building an AI coach. We're not building an AI therapist. We're instead building a platform, a system that allows anyone who is a coach today, any human coach, anyone who is a therapist today, anyone who is a consultant today, we call them experts, to come to our platform to create and train a digital version of themselves. We call it their Amigo. That can reason like them, that can talk like them, that can think like them, that can ultimately deliver the same service that they do for their clients to their clients now, but at a fraction of the cost. And so we're taking this very different approach where we're going after the experts in the world, right, across all of these different spaces and allowing them to build an AI version of themselves, an AI coach, an AI therapist that they then go out and offer to their clients at a fraction of the cost, essentially.
It's not like you're creating an expert in a specific field out of thin air from a data set. You're, creating a digital twin or a digital representation. My sister Jordana is her name. She's a psychologist. And so my assumption is what you're trying to do is essentially recreate Jordana in the digital sense so that she can help more people. Fair to say?
Exactly. A digital representation of her that's trained by her, right? She gets full control over what it says, how it reasons, because I'm not a psychologist. And so I shouldn't be actually the one building this, right? She should be building it. So we took the approach of, can we build the system that can be taught essentially how to do what she does, and then bring her into the loop to say, great, now let's together build this, because she's a true subject matter expert. And again, the key point being, it's all about the decades of experience that she's built up, that expertise that she's built up. How do we take that and scale that out? How do we make sure we don't lose the quality while enabling her to be there for 10,000 times more people than she can be today, due to the fact that she's a human, right? She's got limited hours in a day. And so how do we break that sort of physical barrier for her without taking away and diluting the actual quality of her expertise and her service that she delivers?
Someday soon, the word Amigo will be a noun in the dictionary that is, directed to this use case. I'm excited to see that. So Amigo is, obviously, I assume there's a lot of complex challenges to make this happen. Talk about some of this stuff. Why is it so pivotal to Amigo's success?
So a lot of when we started, to your point, a lot of technical challenges, to be honest, that we've been working on for the past 16 or so months, have been, how do we actually mimic the true value that someone like your sister brings to their clients, right? It's not about answering questions. It's not a QA bot. I know a lot of what we've seen out there in the world today are, I'm going to come in, I'm going to ask a question, I'm going to get a list of sort of bullet points as my answer, and I'm going to go back and forth. But we realized quickly, we work with a lot of coaches, for example. Coaches don't do QA. It's not the service that they deliver in a coaching session. They're not going in and just answering 25 questions in a 30-minute window and then leaving. It's a way more structured conversation that brings into place a lot of context, knowledge, and how they use that knowledge, right? The application of knowledge is their true expertise. So how do we know when is the right time to pull in the right pieces of information and apply it in the right way? That's nuanced than just answering a question against a set of blog posts or books or what have you, right? Memories, right? Just like a coach would sitting in a session, think about, what do I know about Ilan, right? What has he told me in the past that is relevant in this context, in this specific scenario? And I want to pull that right in as well. As I'm navigating that 30-minute coaching session, for example, there's different things that I'm doing as a coach, right? And so we had sort of the technical challenge of replicating that specifically. And so that's sort of where we focused quite a bit. A very popular sort of way people think about, or the most popular common phrase in the space is like, attention is all you need, right? The infamous paper that sort of started all this, the transformer architecture, essentially, that is now the core foundation of all large language models. We internally at Amigo like to say, actually, well, context is all you need, right? Context being the right information at the right time, the right piece of knowledge that I'm applying in the right way, the right memories I'm pulling in. So we essentially built this context engine, essentially, this cognitive architecture that is a context engine that every single time your Amigo comes up with a response, it's pulling in the right context that it needs to then come up with the next best answer, essentially. And so that's sort of a very sneak peek into some of the technical details of how we think about mimicking or replicating your expertise.
Amazing. It's not simply, a user comes on and asks a question and it just gives, a generic response. It's you're trying to mimic a real, human to human interaction and conversation. Fascinating. So you mentioned coaches, and I understand that's one of the, or the main space, or one of the main spaces you guys have really zeroed in on to start here. And I assume there's many other applications for this. We've talked about like a psychologist as it pertains to my sister. But like let's say there's a CEO coach today. Maybe they can speak to, I don't know, 3-4 CEOs in a day. They got to write up their notes. They maybe make a couple intros, whatever it is. And, you can only scale so far being a singles coach. My gut tells me this totally changes the ball game in that respect. Like, are you telling me that if I'm a CEO coach, I could be in 10,000 places at once?
Exactly, right? You're exactly right. A lot of the coaches we work with typically will work with 20 to 25 clients at a time, let's say. But now their Amigo that are out in the world today, right, conducting real coaching, are doing over 100 sessions a month, something that they couldn't do. And what's most interesting is they're doing them. The Amigo is actually conducting those sessions in languages that the coach doesn't even know. So there's an Amigo out there that is coaching in French and German, but the human coach doesn't know French and German at all. So there's sort of language barriers that have been broken. There's time zone barriers that are breaking. There's the ceiling of I can only serve so many people in a given day or in a given week or in a given month. That's being broken. And their end clients, so the end user essentially is coming in sometimes for just 5 minutes, coming in and not coming out, sometimes coming in for 3 hours, 3-hour-long sessions, essentially. And so that's been fascinating, is like 5-minute sessions, 3-hour-long sessions, big variance there. Sessions at 8 a.m., I'm on the train to work, or it's 1:30 a.m. and I'm lying in bed and I need to talk to somebody about this right now. I can't pick up the phone at 1:30 a.m. and call my coach. He'll think I'm crazy. But I could pull out my phone and talk to his Amigo. And so there's so many facets of the types of barriers that get broken when you have an Amigo with you. And there's just been really, really interesting learnings. The most interesting thing I will say is some of the end clients of the coaches that we've been working with are coming in and saying that I actually feel more comfortable and vulnerable with the Amigo because I feel like there is nobody on the other side judging me. So that's been pretty interesting, because people will just feel like all of a sudden now, this thing I can be more comfortable with. I can say things that are quote unquote stupid or things that are embarrassing. And I don't feel like the human is judging me. Now they'll always say, don't worry, human coach, you don't judge me. I don't feel like you do that. But it's just a different feeling that I get. And so those are just a little bit of some of the early learnings that we've had so far.
Yeah, I mean, being able to provide a service in multiple different languages across different time zones for 2 minutes or for 2 hours. I assume the way the way you price this out to the end users is different than paying $250 or $200 an hour to a CEO coach. Scales more for the coach. There's so many different win across the board.
Exactly. That's the key thing, right? It's like, because I no longer, as the coach, right, as the expert, I no longer have to trade my time for money. I can bring the cost of that service down when it is being delivered through my Amigo. And so all of a sudden, and you said $200-$300, but the reality is a lot of the CEO coaches we work with are in the magnitude of $1,000 to $3,000 an hour, are now able to deliver that same value at $20 a month, $50 a month, $100 a month. All of a sudden, there's this massive 90 to 95% reduction in cost which makes it way more affordable for people. And so for the end user, it's not even that, hey, the person who before used to go to that human coach now uses the Amigo. It's more that the person who before couldn't afford that human coach, now all of a sudden they at least have an access to their Amigo. And so it sort of unlocks coaching for a whole segment of people who previously couldn't afford it. It was completely out of reach for them, right? And so that's one of the key things that I think gets us excited. And so that's why even at the forefront of this, it's like you get an affordable 24/7 access to a world-class coach, a world-class therapist, a world-class dietitian, a consultant, you name it, but at a fraction of a cost 24/7, right? Where before that was just physically impossible for you to get access to.
If you're able to execute on this vision, my gut tells me this changes things on a huge, massive, fundamental level. In many ways, the way that we interact with providers, with different services. But like, what are the societal implications for this? How do you think about a world that has Amigo in it and that's pervasive? Yeah.
This is something we talk with our team all the time, right? If you imagine a world where 1 billion people have a coach or 1 billion people have a therapist, an AI coach or an AI therapist, right? A couple of things become very important. Is that 1 billion people having an AI coach that's been developed by one company with one set of views, one style, one structure, one way of doing things? Or is it instead, and this is sort of obviously naturally the world that we want to see, is 10,000 human coaches building 10,000 AI coaches, all with their own set of sort of different backgrounds, diversity of thought, diversity of experiences built into it, that then go and coach 1 billion people. So that world feels to me a lot more interesting, a lot more safe, a lot more compelling than one behemoth of an organization that is out there sort of coaching 1 billion people or providing AI therapy to 1 billion people. So that's sort of one of the core philosophies we have, is how do we amplify the expertise of the world's best experts, tens, if not hundreds of thousands of them, to then go and reach 1 billion people versus one company doing it. That's why even from the beginning, I was like, we're not building an AI coach, right? We're not building an AI therapist. We're building a system that all of these experts can use to amplify themselves.
I mean, the way you're talking is that largely this can be industry agnostic across different use cases. And, I have small kids under the age of 5. My 5-year-old is, starting to think about math or writing. You could have a AI, personal tutor of sorts. You could have imagine it's endless in terms of how many different use cases.
Yes, I can't say which, but we actually just started working with an Ivy League school in the States, right? To sort of walk through and figure out how can we create an Amigo for different professors in their classes, and how do we sort of enable, to your point, that experience. How do we take this professor who is world-renowned that everybody wants access to, and how do we amplify him or her, essentially? And so that's exactly sort of the mindset we have. So we're excited about that. And to your point, we built the system to be very industry agnostic, right? We're like, how do we build a generic, intelligent, AI-powered system that can learn and reason across a set of structures, almost sessions, services, et cetera, but that's a blank canvas, right? Ready to be filled by that expert, whether they are a coach, whether they're an exec coach, leadership coach, whether they're a career coach, whether they're an ADHD or life coach, it doesn't matter there. And I think one thing that's important as well is when you see that world, right, where you have sort of 100,000 different experts who have built their Amigo and are out there scaling out their expertise, they get to participate in the financial upside, right? The economic upside of this. They don't get left behind. They've spent 10, 20, 30 years. Like the most experienced coach we work with has been a coach for 46 years, right? That's 46 years of cumulative knowledge that has been gathered, that if they just sort of don't participate or don't do this, essentially it's going to be locked away forever for the rest of time. And how do we allow them to sort of keep that sustainably going? And how do we allow them to make sure they're participating in the financial upside is also pretty important, right?
I mean, this is the perfect example of AI supercharging various services and professions and, use cases, as opposed to the maybe more pessimistic way of looking at AI, that it's just going to replace everybody and everything.
Exactly. It's not AI is replacing experts. It's experts are being amplified by AI, right? It's really just like flipping that narrative on its head completely. And I think that honestly gets us pretty excited.
Ali, so walk me through it high level. If I'm a coach and I come to Amigo, how does that work? What are the benefits to me?
Yeah. So ultimately, a lot of coaches come to us with this exact question of like, how do I actually use this in my business, in my practice on a daily basis? Is it there to replace me? Is it there to augment me? And the answer is it can do both. So the two most primary ways people will deploy this essentially is one, they'll say, hey, my Amigo is going to completely augment me. So you still get me, right? So I'm a coach. I meet with you once every 4 weeks. That still happens. In between our monthly sessions, you get 24/7 access to my Amigo. And me as a coach, I can see the transcripts of the conversation you're having. I can see summaries. And so that our next human coaching session becomes that much more elevated because I haven't missed a beat on what's been going on in your life in between those sessions. So that's sort of the first. I'm going to augment myself with my Amigo. The second one being, well, I've come across a client, who just can't afford me at all, but I really want to be there for them. I really want to give them something that is tangible that gives them value. And so that is the sort of the more standalone version where they just get the Amigo at a much lower price point, a much lower monthly subscription cost, what have you. And so in that way, you can still keep a pulse on sort of who is in your sphere, who is engaging and interacting and talking to your Amigo. And if you feel like, hey, this is a moment where, this person is really struggling, or I really want to step in, you can go in and say, all right, let's just do two sessions, human sessions with me. And then you can go back, to doing the standalone piece. So any and all of those combinations are possible, but those are the two that we're seeing be the most common so far.
So many different, so much different ways that coaches, or folks that are using Amigo can use it to better their clients, the folks who need their services. So
yeah, it's been interesting. The most fun fact I'll say, the most interesting thing I'll say is sometimes coaches tell us that my Amigo asks questions better than me, and so they'll take notes of like, oh wait, that's a crazy insight. Okay, I'm gonna do this next time in my human session, and so that's been sort of very interesting early on of like, whoa. In some cases, in some contexts, all of a sudden you're like, wait, that's great. And so now initially they trained their Amigo, and now their Amigo is teaching
it's
them to get
training
better
them.
and better. Exactly.
That's awesome. Okay, so Ali, I'd like to shift a little bit here. You guys are, on the earlier stage side and seeing real amazing traction and building an amazing solution. But in order to do all that, you need an incredible team. What's your approach to building an amazing team at Amigo?
Yeah, I think one thing that helps us honestly attract some of the smartest people in the world is we quickly realized the best engineers in the world, for example, want to work on really, really hard problems, really hard technical problems. And I think that is something that we're solving here. And that's quite exciting for them and really helps us attract, almost be a magnet to the right sort of type of person who isn't wanting the more classic, relaxed, stress-free 9 to 5, right? We're in sort of category creation mode a little bit. We're building something net new that didn't exist before, right? And so that requires a different type of mindset and a different type of attitude. I think one thing a lot of early stage companies do is naturally, like, early stage startups can't necessarily compete on cash compensation type of things with the big players like the Googles and the Facebooks of the world. And so one thing they end up doing is going after very junior employees, right? So they'll go after like new grad or 1 year of experience, 2 years of experience engineers, and those are great. Those are great candidates, to be honest, for a lot of companies. We found very quickly that just given the nature of what we were solving, we needed folks with a bit more experience, and so we, instead of doing the traditional path, 2 years out of school, very young team, everybody grinds, everybody works hard. Like, yes, those are important, and we still work hard too, but most of our team is in the 5 to 7 years of experience. And that became a little bit of a sweet spot for us. These people are folks that haven't been people managers in the past, right? They still have been true ICs that have been writing code their entire career so far, but have sort of what we call battle scars a little bit. They've owned entire pieces end to end. They've built things from beginning to finish, and have learned along the way, made mistakes along the way, and can now jump in and take all of those learnings and really accelerate us. And so that's been sort of another core early insight of like, junior employees are great in the right in the right company solving the right problem. Just for us, not a good fit. And so we ended up going with folks that were a bit more experienced.
Ali, when you and I first spoke, one of the things that stood out on my end was your energy, the passion for what you're building. Like it just totally came through. I mean, that word passion is such a buzzword. It just is thrown around so much, but it really, really came through. Like you clearly are excited about what you're trying to solve for at Amigo. I think that energy is probably contagious to the rest of your team. Are there other qualities when you think about the team, that early team there? You know, you talked about, look, people need to work hard. Anything else come to mind? Any traits that you think are, woven across the team?
One of the key themes or traits that we look for is people who have very strong opinions. So very strong opinions in their domain of expertise, whatever that may be. You're a backend engineer, you're a front-end engineer, you're a designer, you're a marketer, whatever the case may be, and is willing to push back on me, actually. Because I have sort of a set of things that I believe about the world, a direction that I'm decisions that I'm making based on information that I have. And I think one thing that I've told everybody is you should be feeling like you're pushing back on me often, and I will be pushing back on you often. And hold that ground. Like if you have that opinion, and it's hopefully driven by some sort of data or some reason that is logical, and we'll have a discussion back and forth. This one thing stuck out to us as something that selects for the right type of person, the right mindset. And also, you can't build strong opinions or have strong opinions unless you have, again, those battle scars, until you have built enough experience to be able to say, okay, great, I actually believe XYZ because of all these reasons, because I've been there, because I've done that. That's sort of the right mindset that we're looking for. And so it feeds and matches perfectly with what I said earlier about the type of the years of experience that we typically like to see for our early founding team. I think folks who are like a year out of school, 6 months out of school, will just be like, well, you know best. So I'll just like go with it, right? Because I just don't know any better. And so I think that's something that is an early learning for us, is like look for the people with strong opinions.
I love that. There's two things I heard there. One is a sense from you, and I know you, and I know you have strong convictions, and you have an opinion on how you want to see the future. But I think there's an underlying awareness that you don't have the answers to everything, and you want people who are experts in their respective functions to be able to have the conviction to make things amazing in those respective functions. I know John, your founding team, backgrounds from Google and Databricks and Plaid. How did you bring everyone together? Are these close buddies of yours? Was you just see each other at a startup event? How did this come to be?
Yeah, John and I met over a year ago now, and quickly realized how complementary we are. Like one thing we like to say is, I can sell anything John can build. John can build anything that I can sell. And that became a little bit of our relationship very early on. And we realized there's a really strong fit for us to build a company like this together. And so that became pretty important. John has spent a lot of time before working on dev tools with only technical founders, for example, and quickly realized like, okay, who's going to sell this thing? And so obviously, the two archetypes you need in the very early days is someone who can sell, someone who can build. And we found that complementary piece with us, with the two of us. And then the rest of our team, almost everybody has known either John and I or I for 5+ years. So we basically just sat down and we're like, all right, let's put down the name of the 5 smartest people we have ever worked with or known. And they're going to start forming our early founding team. And so our very first engineer we hired, John knew for 6 years. Our very first go-to-market person, like non-technical hire we made, I have known for 5.5 years. And so we basically just looked around like, okay, John and I are a really strong fit, really strong complementary skill set. We like before we decided to start this company, we did like a long trial, like worked together, saw each other's sort of working styles and whatnot. And then I went and we stayed together in a tiny studio for 10 days straight. And just like day in, day out, 16 hours a day, just worked together. And got to know each other at an intimate level and realized it was a good fit. And then, like I said, just found who are the smartest people we've worked with ever, and started bringing them into the fold.
I've had the fortune of meeting John, and he's obviously a brilliant product technical mind. And I know you, Ali, and you could sell a garbage wrapper here to anybody. But honestly though, that storytelling ability is so, I see it. I see it with the partners that we help on the talent side, founders I've worked with over the years or invested in or whatever it is. And there's this common thread of being able to sell or tell a story of the future. And as it pertains to building an early team and bringing people together, it's crucial. Without that, you can't bring the greatest minds together to work towards something. So, Ali, you are, correct me if I'm wrong, you're a first-time founder, first-time CEO. You speak like you're a fourth-time CEO. But in the time that you've been building Amigo, any failures you've learned from, anything that, has contributed to the evolution of Ali?
Yeah, first time founder and CEO. But been tinkering around with random ideas for the last 5 or so years. And I think one example I will give you is I was working on another sort of sustainable shopping related idea. And did the classic thing that every other first time rookie founder does, which is just go look up reports to see what are what's an interesting trend in this space, or just go start talking to sort of my customers. And that's good. That's a good start, talking to those potential customers. And seeing like, look, everybody cares about sustainable shopping. Yes, very important, very topical, climate change is real, et cetera, et cetera. And when I go talk to a lot of shoppers, of like, yes, of course, I would love my shopping to be carbon neutral. I would love my purchases to not impact the climate negatively. And that I took as, okay, that's validation, right? Let's go build something to solve this pain point. And then quickly realized everybody I talked to shops at Shein, right? Like Shein makes $50 billion a year, right? And so it's like, the real validation is what are people paying for, right? Not what they are telling you they care about. And so translating now, fast forward to Amigo, we actually went out and made our first $10,000 in revenue before a single line of code was written. Because early days, a lot of what I was doing as part of validating that, coaches and consultants will want a product like this is not just understanding them and asking about their pain points and figuring out if this is valuable or not, but actually at the end of that conversation, sending them a Stripe link to be like, hey, great, you said you want this, go ahead and make a purchase. You get a discount, yes, of course, and we're still going to build this out, and it's not going to be pretty on day one, but if you really, really want this, and if this is really solving a pain point for you, you'll pay me. And people did, right? And that's what really, really told us, okay, there is a product, there's a business, there's a massive change in the world that we can create here through Amigo. And let's go out and actually build it now. And so I think building conviction and validating in the early days, a lot of people just make the mistake of like asking questions and getting a yes and saying, great, that's good enough. That's not good enough. You need to actually see dollars change hands.
I feel like for you, that was probably a really important lesson to learn, because I feel like you could sell anything. At the end of the day, you're trying to change an entire industry, disrupt an entire space, build a great business. And if you think about an important trait of a CEO, and we just talked about storytelling. Would you say that's up there? Any others, most important traits of a CEO?
I mean, I would anchor on storytelling. That will translate to three core things. Because like in the early days, the single most important thing you're doing is one, building the right team, right? You're attracting the right talent. That's sales in a way, right? You're sharing a dream, a vision for the world, and bringing people alongside with you on that. When you're trying to raise capital, you're talking to investors. That's still storytelling. That's still sales. You're bringing them along this same vision, same worldview that you have. When you're talking to and making actual customer sales, right? That's still storytelling. And so I think when you're bringing the team, you're bringing the investors, the right capital, you're selling a product, all of that can be summarized in just the single core most important trait of being able to tell a very compelling story for what you believe the world should be like over the next 5, 10, 20 years. And so I would say like storytelling is honestly the single most important thing.
I mean, obviously, you got to have drive. There's an element of grittiness, and you talked about, hey, like, you'll work 16-hour days, not because you dread it, but because you love what you're building. There's a passion, you know what I mean? So all those things put together, but I hear you on storytelling. Without it, I think that a CEO can't attract incredible world-class talent, can't win customers, can't win investors, and in some ways kind of doomed from day one. So, Ali, maybe we can leave the audience with a closing thought, final question for you. 5, 10 years from now, and AI is moving so quick. It feels like the world is moving so quick. Things are changing. Where is Amigo in 5 to 10 years? What impact do you want Amigo to have on the world?
I'll answer with an interesting viewpoint in terms of imagining a world where your therapist, your financial advisor, your dietitian, your career coach, your leadership coach can all perfectly communicate with each other. What does that world look like, right? Because I think step one is let's at least give you a therapist, give you a coach, give you a dietitian in your pocket 24/7, right? Just the accessibility piece, the affordability piece. And then how do we then now create a world where each of those different components, those facets of your life, those experts in your life can perfectly communicate with each other to give you very holistic advice that understand each other, right? That is now a world where that doesn't even exist today, right? Like my therapist does not talk to my coach at all, who does not talk to my dietitian at all, whatever the case may be.
Your
But
coach doesn't talk to your will and estate planner or to your lawyer or
exactly,
what it, yeah.
exactly, right? But in a world where Amigos is successful, that does happen, right? And all of a sudden, the quality of service, the quality of care that you receive from these different experts is significantly elevated because of that. And so that's sort of something that we will think about, and well, we're already thinking about, but we'll think of actually bringing to life over the next couple of years as we scale up.
That's powerful stuff. Yeah, if you guys can execute on that vision, man, watch out. That's awesome. Ali, well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. This was awesome. It was a lot of fun. And I think the audience probably learned a lot and found, I hope they found what you're building fascinating, as I certainly did. So thank you.